The doctor stared at the lab results, his stomach turning. Inside the hospital bed lay Samuel, a man who had just survived a brutal, month-long battle with a mysterious stomach illness. He had finally been discharged, walking out of the hospital on his own 2 feet. But hours after returning home to his sweet, doting wife, he was back, and this time his heart gave out. The doctor couldn't shake a terrifying suspicion. He looked at the grieving widow, a harmless-looking older woman, and pressured her into signing off on an autopsy. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to uncover enough arsenic in Samuel's system to kill a horse, to understand how a sweet grandmother ended up with a body count that baffled the FBI. We have to go back to where the obsession began. Long before she was a suspect, it seemed a quiet, generational hex had already marked her life. Yet she started out as just an ordinary girl who wanted nothing more than a simple, poetic life. Born to a strict farming family in rural Alabama back in 1905, she spent her grueling childhood laboring under an abusive father. To escape her harsh reality, young and impressionable, she lost herself in vintage romance magazines, completely obsessed with the idea of finding a picturesque, sweeping love story. At just 16, she thought she found her fairy tale when she married a man named Charlie. Instead, she swapped one abusive home for another, moving in with a cruel mother-in-law. It wasn't long before she realized her life was not a romance novel, and that is when the fairy tale turned into a nightmare. It was as if her broken dreams had unlocked something dark and hungry, transforming her search for love into an infectious curse that claimed anyone who dared to love her back. A dark cloud seemed to follow her wherever she went. A string of horrific, inexplicable tragedies began to decimate the people around her. In 1927, 2 of her healthy children suddenly collapsed and died without any apparent medical cause. Terrified, her husband fled with their eldest daughter, leaving a newborn behind. She didn't stay lonely for long. She turned back to her beloved Lonely Hearts ads to find husband number 2, Frank. They exchanged passionate letters, but once they wed, the fairy tale shattered into alcoholism and abuse. Slowly, the people in her orbit continued to drop. When her eldest daughter returned years later with children of her own, a newborn granddaughter died mysteriously after she visited. Months later, her 2-year-old grandson choked to death while in her care. Then it was her husband, number 2, Frank's turn. After a heavy night of drinking, Frank became violently ill and died within a week. Doctors assumed it was simple food poisoning, and she collected the life insurance to buy a brand new house. But by now, it was as if an unseen, tragic cloud had settled permanently over her life. Next came husband number 3, who she met through another romance ad. He too was suddenly claimed by a sudden heart attack. When she moved on to husband number 4, a notorious cheater, it seemed the curse in her bloodline only grew more aggressive. Before she could even address his infidelity, a bizarre string of tragedies struck her own family. Her mother broke her hip and needed a caretaker. Within months of moving in, the elderly woman died without warning. Then, just days later, her sister passed away suddenly after a brief visit. It was as if death itself was stalking her inner circle, clearing the room until she was left entirely alone with her cheating husband, and like a grim clock ticking down, he, too, soon succumbed to a mysterious, sudden illness. By the time she married her fifth husband, Samuel, she seemed like a doting, sweet older woman. Samuel wasn't a drunk, but he made a fatal mistake. He tried to control her, banning her from reading her trashy romance magazines. So one night she baked him a prune cake laced with her favorite secret ingredient, arsenic rat poison. Samuel spent an agonizing month recovering in the hospital. Believing he was safe, he finally returned home, only for his beloved wife to serve him one final lethal cup of poisoned coffee. But this was her ultimate slip-up. The hospital doctor had been highly suspicious of Samuel's sudden relapse. He cleverly convinced the grieving widow to permit an autopsy. When the results came back, the lab found enough arsenic in Samuel's tissues to kill a horse. Sitting in the interrogation room, she didn't weep or deny the horror. Instead, she did something that sent chills down the spines of hardened detectives. She smiled, giggled, and laughed out loud as she described exactly how she poisoned her husbands. The illusion of a tragic cosmic curse was instantly shattered. There was no dark cloud following this ordinary woman, only a cold, calculating mind. She wasn't just a grieving grandmother, she was Nancy Agnes Hazel, known to criminal history as the infamous Black Widow and the giggling granny, Nanny Doss. Police eventually exhumed her past victims, finding them completely saturated with rat poison, though suspected of up to 12 murders, including her own mother, sisters, and grandchildren. She claimed she didn't do it for the money. Smiling for the flashing cameras, she admitted she was simply searching for the perfect mate, and whenever the romance died, her husbands had to die too.